Welcome to Speed City with John Massengale, Les Kaiser, and Jonathan Green. It's the fastest hour on the radio, Speed City.
Okay, Speed City fans, I am delighted to welcome to another podcast one of our top drivers in the all-new Esports Championship presented by Pirelli for Trans Am, and that is Tyler Kicera, who currently lies second, a very narrow second, by just 7 points after the first two rounds. And at the moment, it's he and Josh Hurley who have been tearing up the circuits we've gone to so far, which is Laguna Seca and Road Atlanta, and we are about to head to Daytona. But Tyler, first and foremost, how much was this a bit of a reprieve, a distraction, and actually a little bit of fun as well? How pleased were you that we got this going, as it were?
Yeah, I was super ecstatic about the series really coming together and being more than just a one-off event. I think I even emailed John Claggett and said, hey, let's try to get everybody together and do something. And then I never got a response, but then to my delight, we got some contact that we were going to try to do something with the series, and so that I was really excited about that. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun preparing. It's actually been a lot of work to prepare, just because I don't want to let any of my partners down, and at the same time want to make sure that I'm representing myself, because I really don't get a lot of opportunities to show what I can do in a real car. Each year, I don't race a ton. So I really thought this would be a good opportunity, as well. I was new to Trans Am last year. I did 2 events, and so I felt like kind of an outsider, and I thought this would be a really good opportunity to get to know some of the people in the paddock and some of the other drivers and build a bit of rapport with everybody. So that when I do get back to the track with everyone else, there's a little bit more of a relationship there than there was before.
So I'm sure you, like the other drivers, have gone from going, oh, great, this will be a bit of fun, to wait, it's not really fun because I'm actually driving against professional racing drivers. And wait, they're the drivers I would be driving against if I were in the real championship, which I am in the real championship. And these guys know what they're doing. And I've got sponsors, and I've got a livery car. There it is behind you, behind me. But, suddenly it went from being a bit of fun to being, oh, I'm going to put my professional driver's hat on again. Did you kind of go through that whole sort of gamut?
Yeah, I mean, initially, we did Lime Rock, and it was like, I want to do well so I get my name out there and have the bragging rights. And now it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a serious deal now, I feel like. And, there's real, prizes on the line and things like that. And, thanks to John Claggett and everybody for putting that up. So yeah, I think it is serious. And I think everybody's approaching it, more seriously every week. You can see the level of preparation. We can track kind of how many laps everybody's doing and practicing things on the server, and it's pretty interesting to see who turns the most and who doesn't, and how quickly people come up to speed.
And it's pretty cool, like you say, you're new to Trans Am, but to be able to race legends like Boris Said and Scott Lagacy Jr., and hopefully our champion from TA2, Mark Miller, will be entering soon. That's got to be a thrill, because you probably won't have raced many of them before. And even though it's a simulation, they're very much serious about racing against you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I really liked about Trans Am when we were looking at what to do kind of at the next level. There's a ton of really great drivers in this series in TA2. And I feel like if you can run with these guys, you can run with anybody, like in terms of the level of talent, I think is really high. If you look at Cameron Lawrence, he's won the Rolex 24, and Mark Miller's run at Le Mans, and Rafa's the IndyCar Rookie of the Year. There's just there's a very strong pedigree of drivers in the series, and so yeah, whether it's on the real track or virtual, I feel like to me it's no different. Like we're able to hang here, and I think we proved last year we could hang on the real track too. So just excited to show what I can do. And I think the one thing about the sim, which I like, I have a small family team that's running our car, and we don't really have much experience, with the platform. So it was a huge learning curve at the first 2 races we did last year. And I think one thing I really like about the sim is it's a complete baseline spec setup. And so I feel like, I'm really in equal equipment, and it really all comes down to the driver and technique here. And so that's got me kind of excited because I feel like it's a bit more of a level playing field than maybe I was on last year when we first got into the series in real life.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you mentioned, a lot of our drivers have either come from single-seaters like Rafa, Indy, or they've been straight into Trans Am and they've been sort of stock car drivers all their lives, or they come from IMSA and sports cars or GT racing. What's your background? How did you get into racing in the first place?
Yeah, so my dad got me into racing when I was 6. I started racing quarter midgets and go-karts at a small asphalt oval down towards Downingtown, Pennsylvania. And I did that till I was about 13. And then I started running Allison Legacy cars, little stock cars at a half-mile track in Pittsburgh, Jennerstown. Took a little bit of time off, just kind of shifted focus to school and college. And my dad has been a really competitive SCCA racer for a long time. So even when I wasn't driving, I was still going to the racetrack and wrenching on cars and things like that.
What did he drive?
He ran everything from like a stock car would be the Sportsman series. It used to be a series in the early 90s to running Sports 2000s and did a little bit of pro stuff with that and Spec Racer Fords. And so actually Spec Racer Ford was my first endeavor into road racing. I just managed to pick it up, I feel like, pretty quickly, and probably just from, being around it so much and having kind of that experience as a young kid. So got into Spec Racers and did that for a couple of years. Did really well. I think right off the bat, I think my first race ever finished second at Watkins Glen in like a field of 40, which was, I thought, pretty good at the time, and just kind of built on that and got into Spec Miatas, took a little bit of time off, got into Spec Miatas in 2012. I've really been running that ever since, competed for national championships, won a couple of national points championships, won the NASA national championships and that. So, really kind of we're looking for what the next step was in terms of, pro racing was really kind of the next level, and dabbled a little bit in Global MX5 Cup. Was working with a team out of Massachusetts called Flat Out Motorsports. Helped them develop a little bit of a program that to try to get that going for them, and ran a one-off race at Watkins Glen again and finished second that weekend to Todd Lamb, who has done a ton of stuff in sports cars. And just was looking like, do we go that route or maybe even like F4 or what's the next level? And I think if you look at the TA2 platform, what you get for the money is incredible. Like it's a hell of a car. The lap times are 5 seconds quicker or something at Watkins Glen than a GS car for, I would think, a lot less money. So the fun factor and value, in the series is incredible. And then it's Trans Am. So it's got, a ton of history and legacy in racing. Plus, again, you're running against guys that come from IndyCar and IMSA. And so I feel like, there was just, the series had everything we wanted. And we felt like we could do it on our own. Didn't need to rely on a group of engineers to do it. And here we are.
It's interesting. And I would have argued that, or I would put forward that your background starting off on dirt tracks with way more power than you need on dirt is not too dissimilar about controlling a beast like a Trans Am car, in that, it kind of forces you to be out of your comfort zone because you've got so much power. And if you use it badly, you can lose the tires. So a bit like dirt racing, you've got more than you need, but it's all a matter of keeping it in that going forward zone.
Yeah, actually, so maybe you got me a little confused there with Josh. I haven't done any dirt racing.
Oh,
no.
I thought when you said midgets, that was dirt.
No, I did. I was asphalt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Which maybe gives me a bit of an advantage because I've been on asphalt my entire life. But no, it's, I feel like actually the one thing that's really helped me, and there's probably people that'll say the Spec Miata guys come with bad habits, but I really feel like doing well and being able to run a car at the limit and getting everything you need to out of a momentum car like that, it really helps you when you jump into a high horsepower car. In the Miata, the throttle is an on-off switch. There is no like feathering the throttle. That's been a big thing for me to get used to in the Trans Am car, and not, roasting the tires. But at the same time, you can throttle steer the car, which is different for me. But a lot of that rolling speed to apex and things like that's the hardest thing to learn, I feel like, in a race car. And I've got that base already. And so if anything, I feel like in the Trans Am car, I have to back that off. I feel like I overdrive the car too easily, which is probably a good thing, because I know that, and I can back it off, and try to get out of the corner, better and on throttle sooner, to lengthen that straightaway, that's coming up.
I had to smile when we went to the first driver's briefing on Zoom, because I kept thinking about how we got started at Sebring and everything looked so rosy with the live streaming and the new app. And then suddenly we're all shut down and everybody's at home and all you want to do is go racing, and you're all stuck with your families in your houses. And then the e-racing championship comes on and you were like, oh, let's all go, let's go crazy. And it was a sense of that. Were you like, couldn't wait to just do some sort of racing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I don't get to do a ton of racing, so I saw this as an opportunity to compete with the same guys at the same level. And so, yeah, I went all in. I had we'll call it a cheap sim setup that I was running at like my office desk. And I quickly realized that wasn't going to cut it and that I needed to upgrade. So, luckily was able to get stuff still, even with the COVID thing, and shipping is still happening. So yeah, I got really excited to the point where I went and spent a bunch of money.
It's not like a racing driver.
Typical race car driver, Get really excited.
I gotta be fast. I need the gear.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how excited I was.
Well, why don't we talk about the setup then? What's your rig? And if you've got any leftovers, I'll take them. I'm setting up. I've got the computer now, but I'm now looking. I'm in the market for the hardware. So okay. What did you bag for?
Yeah, so I went with the Fanatic pedals, the Club Sport pedals, and wheelbase, and then I went with their kind of universal wheel hub and just typical wheel, and then the shifter, which on these cars you're just using the paddles anyway. But I think the biggest thing for me is that through the work that I do in the entertainment industry, we use VR for a lot of previs for rock shows and things like that. So I'm pretty used to using VR in my professional world. And so I've just naturally adapted to that. I think the level of immersion with that is incredible. And I think once you do that, it's like really difficult to go back to using a flat monitor. I tried doing a couple laps the other day at Atlanta just on my monitor, and I was all over the place running off the track. And it was like, I'm sure I'd get used to it, but the VR side of things, that's, I think, one of the big pieces of my kit that makes me maybe a little bit different than most. I know Josh uses the VR headset as well, but then some people argue it's an advantage and some people will say it's not. So
you have to deal with motion sickness at all?
I don't get motion sickness, and frankly, I think a lot of that has to do with, in what I know about the technology, is it has to do with like the frame rate, the refresh rate. So if it's really slow and laggy and it's very jumpy as you're moving your head around, it's going to make you sick. But I made sure that I got a computer and I got all the hardware I needed to make sure that it was smooth and precise. So I haven't had any problems with it, and I've spent a lot of time in the VR headset over the last couple of weeks.
Well, let me tell you, that's one thing that's really interested me about the group of drivers we've got together, and it's growing exponentially. But just looking at everybody's background, we've got some really interesting day jobs, as it were. Most of you do this as a hobby. Some are professionals, but most of you, do this as part of something else that you do. You mentioned you're in the entertainment and events area. Tell us a little bit more about that and how it's helped you learn sim racing.
Sure. So I work for a company called Tay Towers. We're the world leader in staging and automation for the live event world. So I think we've got the world record of like building the 20 highest grossing concert tours of all time. We do a ton of theme park work and rides, as well as theater equipment on cruise ships and in opera houses around the world. and in particular, I'm the head of creative for the company. So I work with, the artists and our clients to help develop the projects and the shows, effectively doing a lot of the concept design that then gets translated over to our engineering team and ultimately to our fab shop that builds all the crazy robotics and machinery that makes all the rock shows happen. So and yeah, I mean, just in terms of where I'm at with sim racing, again, coming back to VR, I don't know that if I was not in my line of work with experience with VR, if I would probably even have gone that route. But I just have enough familiarity with it that it just was a natural fit for me.
Well, the start of the championship's been superb. I mean, right out of the gate at Laguna Seca, and I want you to talk about both Laguna and Road Atlanta. But did you surprise yourself at the level you were able to get to straight from the get-go? Because you've been fast right from the start.
I was, to be honest. When we ran at Lime Rock backing way up, I felt like it was really interesting because a lot of the guys that we run with, or that I did run with last year, so like Mark Miller and Thomas Merrill, it was like we were all at the front at that. And I sort of felt like the real world front of the pack was at the front of the pack there. We were all pretty close. And in fact, I think Thomas and Mark Miller were even quicker than I was. So I was a little bit surprised when we went to Laguna and I was just that far ahead, it seemed like, right off the bat. And then Josh Hurley, kind of as he started to learn Assetto Corsa, which I didn't have any experience with before either, he got quicker and everything got so much closer and tighter as we got closer to the race day. I know we unfortunately had the glitch on the Saturday before. I really hated to see it get pushed a week because I knew everyone was going to get a week's more practice to get better, which was a little tough, but still managed to have a good weekend there. And then, yeah, I mean, as you can see, like Ernie Francis, he's really picking it up and getting quicker. I think you're going to see the front of the field get a lot tighter, as we move on, and it's already happened, I think, over the last couple of races.
Can you see this battle between you and Hurley developing? I mean, it was awesome at Road Atlanta. Tell us about the second race because, I mean, you were so close. If we'd have gone a few more extra laps, you'd have had him.
Yeah, it was, ironically enough, so the inverted starts are really, really tricky, I feel like. It's kind of a crapshoot as to whether you get crashed on that first lap or not, because usually there's guys that would have been behind you in the first race who maybe don't quite have the pace, making mistakes and running off and spinning, and it's so easy to get collected. I think Josh may have gotten collected actually in that second race in the first lap incident. But and then even when the guys that I was immediately running with right after the green flag, and I think I settled into like 5th or 6th place. Even though I was like half to 3/4 of a second a lap quicker, it's still not enough to make a difference where it's an easy pass. I had to force the issue a couple times, and it was really tricky and took me a lot of time to get up to P2. But by that point, Cameron had like stretched out 4 or 5 seconds, and I think I may have only had about 5 laps left, and I just knew I needed to keep my head down and go and hope that maybe he got held up in traffic or made a mistake. And it was one of those where, it's like a golf analogy when you putt the ball. It's like the ball never has a chance of going in unless you actually get the ball there. If you leave it short, it never has a chance. So I knew I just needed to keep pushing hard and do everything I could to get up to him. And yeah, I was surprised on the last lap. I think we had like maybe 3/4 of a second gap at the start finish line. And by like turn 5, I was on his bumper. And I knew with the track in Road Atlanta, there was one place that I was going to be able to make a move, and it was down the back straight. And I don't know if it was on purpose for him or not, but he kind of got a slow exit out of, I think it was 6, 7. 7, sorry. And I got a run, and like I had nowhere to go but either hit him or go to the right. And unfortunately, like, of course I can't let off because that's all my momentum. And so it just put me on the wrong side of him, headed down the back straightaway. And, going in there too, at Lime Rock, it was a similar deal on the last lap with him where he was behind me going into turn one. And I really didn't give him much room, and he turned me sideways. And I didn't want that to happen again. And I probably was a little too forgiving and conservative. I left him maybe a little too much room on the inside because I was up ahead of him at sort of the apex for 10A. But then kind of coming off 10B, my car slid sideways and he was hooked up and gone. So I definitely needed another lap or two to try to make that happen. But I guess at the end of the day, I was just happy to make it exciting for everybody. And, it was a really great last lap, I think, in general.
And Hurley did a good job coming from a 10th place start and coming through to get good points to basically maintain the lead. But we've now had, a couple of different winners, and now Cameron's coming into the game. Like you said, Ernie Francis Jr. is going to be a factor. He's going to get quicker. Looking ahead now, perhaps to Daytona and on, how do you see Daytona first and foremost? And we'll talk about where you want to go after that.
Yeah. So Daytona, I think, is going to be interesting. I've never run Daytona in real life. I've got a lot of laps at Atlanta. I've run at Laguna. My recollection in watching the past Trans Am races there is it's not quite as technical of a track, and the draft comes into play. So there's a little bit more forgiveness. You can be a little bit slower through the infield, and you can make a little bit more of that up on the big tracks. So I expect to see, the front be even closer, and I expect to see even more people contending for the win at Daytona than we saw at Laguna or Road Atlanta.
You made an interesting point about, like you say, that last lap at Road Atlanta, which is the space that you give and the space that you don't give. A lot of people that I've been talking to, a lot of drivers I've been talking to, say one of the big challenges about sim racing is that space awareness, because unlike in real life, you've got a much better depth of perception and proximity awareness than you perhaps would in a sim. And when you think you're about to touch, you may or may not be that close. Is it something that you're trying to still dial in?
Well, I think actually that's maybe one of the advantages with VR, because everything you're seeing in the real world is three-dimensional. Like, you do have depth of field in a way that you don't get on a triple monitor. So when cars are in front of you and when they're in your peripheral, you can really sense their closeness. And I feel like that's a real a benefit to VR. But I think in general, like maybe just subconsciously, Cameron was behind me after we were corner. And like, if it was in a real car, I probably would have pinched him off, and he probably would have given me the room because he didn't want to wreck me. But in the sim, there's a little bit less of that. Like, I'm just going to give this guy the corner because it's a sim, and, I can use the bumper a little more and I don't have to pay for the crash damage kind of thing. So, but Cameron's a pro, and a bunch of the other guys are too. So, it's been really clean the last couple of races. But spatial awareness, I think, is, especially the guys behind you, and you've got to almost, I was anticipating a hit from him in that corner, and it just didn't happen. But I worry a little bit about the guys behind me maybe having an issue with depth perception or that. So that's why I kind of gave a little bit more room than I probably should have, just because I wanted to make sure he was safe and not going to be, having a glitch and coming over on me, or maybe, missing his break point or something like that. So you do have to compensate for it. It's definitely something different than I feel like you have to really think about in the real car. It comes, I think, a lot more naturally in the real car than it does in the sim. You have to really consciously think about it.
Another thing I think is interesting is that the reason we paired up with Talk Motorsports is that they were already talking to Trans Am before the pandemic about developing a potential Trans Am game, of which there isn't at the moment. So we're doing the car that you see behind me. We're doing a one make Corvette spec, as it were. But while the game is going on, they're looking at developing a proper TA2 car. And your feedback, all of you drivers' feedback about what feels real, what doesn't feel real, can all be kind of taken on by the gamers and help them to develop an actual Trans Am game, which I think is really exciting for both you and for the consumer who can finally go, see what it feels like to race a beast like a Trans Am car.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've never obviously driven a GTLM Corvette, but tell me where I can, and I'll do it in a heartbeat. But yeah, I mean, and I'm pretty far removed from running a TA2 car. I didn't run Sebring, so that sort of feel in the seat of my pants and my hand-eye and all of that is probably a little off. But I do feel like it's pretty close. There's at least in my car, a little numbness in the steering wheel that I feel in this car. The acceleration feels similar. Top speeds seem to be pretty close as well. So, I'm really hoping when we get to Indy, which I plan to be my first real race within the series, if hopefully we can continue with that, is that really like being out of a race car now for what'll end up being 9 months, that the speed sensation, the hand-eye, the timing of like approaching a brake zone at 160 miles an hour, getting that brake point precisely. I feel like if anything else, the sim is really going to help me there, at least just stay sharp and fresh from that perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no substitute for seat of the pants feel, and that takes seat time. But, the timing of hand-eye is so important. And I think, that there is a substitute for that, which is the sim. So that's why I'm kind of excited about this and also looking forward to seeing how well it translates over at Indy.
And just two questions. One about the Sim Championship. Where would you like to race? If because we could race anywhere, but where are you looking forward to potentially racing that is either a track that Trans Am already go to, or that you would just like to go to and race?
Yeah. Well, Watkins Glen has a soft spot in my heart. I've won a lot of stuff there. I've run really well in a lot of different cars and series there. So I'd love to figure out a way to go there in the championship. VIR is another favorite of mine as well. I'm trying to think, circuits around the world. I mean, I think somebody mentioned, I think Boris, probably because he has a ton of laps there, wanted to run the Nürburgring. He probably thought that he'd be able to clean everyone's clock there. But I think that'd be kind of cool just to try it. I don't know that it'd be great for the spectators because we'd all get so strung out that you guys would have a hard time probably trying to keep it interesting, although I'm sure you do a good job of that. That could be.
I'll do the Nordschleife for the Green Hell anytime. I would have thought that'll be entertaining.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So put that on my list.
All right.
I don't know. I think it'd be really cool to go to Spa.
Yeah.
On the sim, I'd love to do one of the events there. Such an iconic track and great elevation. It's one of the things I love about the Glen is the elevation changes in the banking and so many different kinds of corners that I feel like you also get at Spa.
Going back to the real championship, as you say, we are hoping, fingers crossed, to go racing at Indianapolis on the Grand Prix circuit in June. And that will be your first real taste of, this year's Trans Am series. What are your aspirations? What are your hopes? As you mentioned, you've come out of Miatas. It's a big leap, but it's one that you feel that you don't need a bunch of engineers around you to complete, and you can do it cost effectively. So what goals, if any, have you set for this coming season?
I tend to set my goals pretty high. It's something that's rewarded me well in my career and the rest of my life is almost set unachievable goals, overshoot, and you'll typically end up doing better than if you just set a reasonable goal. I'd love to come away with a win. I think if I'm being realistic, I'd love a podium. We were in contention at the Glen with a podium until a late caution came out, and similar at VIR, we were in third running with Mark Miller when we had a mechanical issue. So I think it's definitely, we're capable of it. And I think if a couple of things go our way, we've got a real shot at a podium. So I'd love to see that. And if we can squeak one out, I'd love to get a W at the end of the day.
And how do you enjoy the, if you like, community camaraderie of Trans Am? You mentioned the history, but in modern day, you've got a real cross section of youngsters who are like yourself, are coming from different angles. You've got JP Southern coming from single seaters, Kent Vaccaro likewise. You've come from Miana, and then you've got your Boris Seds and your Raffas and your Mark Millers. It's an interesting combo.
Yeah, no, it's a really diverse group in terms of experience and age, all of that. You know, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 35, so I'm past your quote unquote prime, I guess, if you want to call it that. But at least in terms of today's drivers, you know. But yeah, it's you know, the one thing I've known Dylan McIvern for a long time. I consulted with him a little bit before making the move. My dad and my family, we've known the Dysons for a long time. So I consulted with Chris a little bit. You know, and the one thing that we really liked about the series after talking to Chris was he kind of equated it to, you know, when you go to IMSA or Michelin Pilot Challenge, you know, it's ultra competitive to the point where it's really can be not fun. And, you know, there's sort of like these imaginary walls around teams where they don't talk to each other, they don't share or anything like that. And, you know, Chris said, hey, this is sort of like a grown-up version of the club paddock. And, you know, I said, okay, that's really interesting to us. And it really came to fruition at the Glen. You know, we were totally, I'd say, out to lunch initially, but Elias Anderson, Barry Bowes, you know, helped us out a ton, you know, with just some information and lending us a little bit of equipment. You know, the guys at Howe Racing Enterprises are amazing. You know, I give them a lot of credit actually for our success in the first couple races, because they really pointed us in the right direction from a setup standpoint. And so, yeah, I think the paddock there didn't really, aside from not knowing many of the drivers, didn't really feel much different than a club paddock. And it was really friendly. And for us, you know, it's serious and we want to win and we have partners that we want to do well for, but at the same time, we're there to have fun. And I'm not putting food on the table at the moment doing this. So if I'm not having fun, I don't want to do it. And so, you know, I feel like the Trans Am paddock is really great for that. It's a great community, very friendly and open. And if you need something, you know, for the most part, the guys are willing to help you out. And I think that's a great, you know, quality of Trans Am.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this discussion, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think you'll find that when you get to the real Trans Am series, that continues. And yes, you may not get as much help if you keep beating them, but no, it's a pretty good paddock to be in, and everybody loves just going racing and muscle cars. Can you win this thing? Can you win? I don't know if you know this, but there is a real Trigon trophy that John Claggett is going to hand to the eSport winner. So can you win this thing?
I'm going to give it everything I got. I think I'm in a good position right now. And we're going to, like I said, give it everything we got. I think it's within touch. And as long as we can just continue doing what we've been doing and, you know, make sure that Hurley finishes behind us a little bit more than he has, I think we'll be in good shape.
And who else should me and Ben be watching out for? You've been rubbing shoulders and banging panels with them. Who else is going to come good?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, is it Nick Rossino? I think Cameron Lawrence, you know, Ernie Francis. Those three I see are kind of like the next tier, if you want to call it that. Sort of, I feel like Josh and I are still maybe on a little bit of different level from a lap time standpoint, but and it really comes down to doing it consistently. But I think those guys are going to be there, you know, moving forward. Not quite sure who beyond that, but, you know, Dylan Archer has been quick too. I think he just had a bit of a weight penalty issue at Road Atlanta that maybe put him behind. But yeah, I expect all those guys to be in contention for this, you know, come the end of the championship.
Well, listen, best of luck, Tyler. I love the livery, really nice, very distinctive, especially in the game. But hey, you've been putting on a great entertainment for us. Keep it going. And best of luck to you at Daytona.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Appreciate it.